y'all, welcome to my kitchen where I make southern shortcut recipes. Today we are making a recipe that has got to be one of the most southern recipes out there, and that is fried yellow or summer squash. It is so easy. So what you're going to need is cornmeal. Now you can use the cornmeal or cornbread mix, but really that has leavening in it. Baking soda, baking powder, and flour. I like to just use cornmeal, but you can add a little bit of flour in there if you want to, but I found that the flour kind of robs the area on the squash and doesn't let the cornmeal stick as much. So I just go simple, and I say about 1/3 of a cup of cornmeal, but honestly, I just get the package and pour out whatever I think I'm going to need for that batch of squash. And then, so that is all you need there. And I use about 3/4 of a teaspoon of table salt. And I add that in right here. And 3/4 teaspoon might be a little more than I really need, but since not all of it's going to stick to the squash, that's why I add a little bit more. And then I'll tell you about another trick on the salt in a second. And then pepper it's an option. If you like pepper on yours, you can absolutely grind some in there at this point. Some of you guys have mentioned in the comments on the blog recipe that you've added Old Bay seasoning, Creole seasoning. All those are great flavor choices. So for the equipment, what you're going to need is just a knife and a cutting board and a skillet. It can also be a saucepan. I also like to use a cast iron skillet. But if you're going to use a skillet, make sure it has high sides. Even though we're not going to deep fry, which is lots of oil, you want it to be a high side because it does splatter. And you don't really want to use a non-stick skillet unless it does say it can take the heat, because we're going to get these squash pieces up to 375. So, I guess the best size I think for squash is this is my favorite size. Some people like them large, and this one has grown a little longer, so it's a little deep yellow, but crook neck, straight neck, any way you want to slice it, works for me. So the first thing I do is I just cut off a little bit of the end right there. Make sure you've washed these. Just run them under cold water. And if you can see this, about 1/4 inch thick. And this could be personal preference. If you like them super thin and crunchy, then that's good. And if you want to go a little thicker and make them hearty, that's good too. So I wanted to show you a shortcut. Now you don't have to buy any fancy equipment to make this at all, but this is one of my favorite little tools in the kitchen, and it's not expensive, and these are called handheld mandolins. So you can definitely cut these with a knife, but you can also adjust the thickness on these. And look at this. See, exact same thickness, and it went faster. Now, as you get down to the nub, as I call it, it does come with something that you can put on here to scrape down. Don't cut your fingers. So, I'll just finish cutting those, and this will be enough to get us started. Now, remember I told you I was going to tell you another salt trick. First of all, you might be wondering, why is my salt in this? It's a test kitchen trick I learned many years ago. We always had pimento jars because, you know, we're in the South, so we always made pimento cheese. So salt went in these, and the little tiny 2-ounce pimento jars held the pepper. So I just continued that on. So a trick, if maybe your squash is a little dry, maybe it has gone a little long in the garden and it doesn't produce any kind of liquid at all, any kind of moisture, when you slice it, because that's what the cornmeal adheres to, just put your salt on now instead of over there. Wait just a minute, go do something and come back, and that salt brings the moisture up to the surface and lets the cornmeal stick. So this is all you do for this recipe to bread it. No difficult dredging or anything. So all you do, and I use a paper plate just for easy cleanup, and I'm also going to use the same paper plate after I dump out the cornmeal and put paper towels down to drain it. So that's all you do. Is that salt trick has really helped. You just press it down. And I do like to use yellow cornmeal just because, you know, as a food stylist, you also eat with your eyes first. So the bright yellow cornmeal really gets your attention. I just think it's pretty. But white cornmeal, stone ground cornmeal, all of those will work. So I'm just going to finish this. Okay, so now we're over here at the stove, and I have my high side skillet with about 2 cups of oil in there getting hot. Now, let me show you my trick. It is getting to be almost, it's 347. I want it to be between 365 and 375 for the perfect. So this is just a tool that I use. It is a infrared thermometer. It is not to be used for your forehead, but it does kind of work on this. And the reason I use it instead of this is one of the shortcuts is it's not deep frying. We're just using a little bit of oil. So let me check again on the temperature. All right, we are there. Also, I can also tell because little bit, I'm turning the heat down a little bit of, not smoke, but I can see the heat is rising. Another way to test if you don't have any of those tools, when you sprinkle in some cornmeal and it really sizzles, that means it's ready. So let's check our temperature. 370, just 5 more degrees. So the oil, use vegetable oil, canola oil, peanut oil, anything with a high smoke point. So I'm going to drop one in and test it. Perfect. See how it just raises up and sizzles? So I'm going to go ahead and put a few more in. If you do not want to use your fingers to do this, you absolutely can use the tongs that we use to remove the squash. Now, you do not want to put too many at one time, so you don't want them crowded because it will reduce the temperature of the oil too fast and they won't be nice and crispy. So I think what I've got here on my cutting board is just the right amount. I'll set this aside. So they really just cook about 1 minute on either side, sizzle, sizzle. You might be wondering why I have this. So with the way my stovetop is, my cabinet is really close to the stovetop. So I just put this here and I call it my splatter proof. Anything that might splatter, just a little tip because then you can go just wipe it off. A lot easier than wiping off your cabinet. So it is cooking right now. You can use tongs to remove, or you can use something like this and you can scoop in several. I just like tongs because it's easier for me to turn with that. Several of you have asked in the blog post comments, can you make these in the air fryer in the oven? Absolutely. All you have to do is, instead of cooking them in oil, once you've got the cornmeal on them, you spray them. I just happen to have it right here. You spray it with oil, not cooking spray, because that is propelled with butane. That's a whole nother video. But you want to spray it with oil on both sides, and then you can air fry it about 375, 390 for 2 to 3 minutes. You do need to flip them over probably. And in the oven about 425, 4 to 5 to 6 minutes, and flip them over. Depending on your air fryer, you might not have to flip them over at all. And that's how you can make the fried squash in the air fryer in the oven too. I also wanted to tell you while those are cooking, The reason I like to use the infrared thermometer, which again is not exact, but it's really, really close for the oil. Since we are using just a little bit of oil, not very deep, when I put the candy thermometer in there, it barely even reaches it. So this doesn't really work that well. And you can use an instant read, but even an instant read thermometer has to go down a certain amount to get to the little notch. So I have just found that this works perfectly. And again, you can use the sprinkling of the cornmeal as a tip. So you're looking for between 365 and 375. And I also like to just put my hand over a little bit, and I can tell, I can still put my hand here. And I know, let's see what the temperature is while it's cooking. So it has come down to 354. So I know I can turn my heat up just a tad. So this little guy is ready to be turned. Just flip him over. Doesn't that look good? Nothing better than fried squash in the summer, especially if it comes from the garden or a farmer's market, right? Or a grocery store that sells local produce. That's good too, if you want to buy local. All right, so I am just turning these over one at a time. And you see this did not take long at all. We're not using a lot of oil. And it takes less time on the second side than it does the first side. Okay, I think they are done. So I'm just going to take that same paper plate I used for the cornmeal, put a couple paper towels over there to drain, and we're just going to put these on here. Again, if you have something like a strainer spider, you can reach in here and grab several at a time. Perfect. Yum. That's our first batch. And here we are. We have a batch or a mess of fried squash ready to taste. And what I do is with every batch, I just run a different paper towel across like this. And that's how I drain them. So let's see. Let me just try that. They're hot, y'all. Did y'all hear that crunch? Yum. That is so good. Let's try this one. I can't wait for dinner. What I'll do is I'll just put these over here on this plate. And if they last long enough for dinner, we'll have them for dinner tonight. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, learning how to make easy Southern fried squash where you don't have to deep fry it. And hopefully I gave you a lot of shortcut tips. So if you want more Southern shortcut recipes, go over to gritsandgouda.com and check out my recipes. Bye, y'all.